Hey Matt, so a lot of clients have been asking me recently about why they're stronger and weaker in different parts of an exercise and asking how that works.
Let's take it to the bikes. So first, we need to talk about the physiology and anatomy of what is going on in the stronger and weaker points. And so the muscle is made up of myofibrils, which then are made up of microfilaments. And those microfilaments are actin and myosin. So as I drew here, this is a non-contracted muscle. And so how that's going to look is that when it's non-contracted, the microfilaments aren't going to be lined up perfectly, and they're not going to be as attached at a perfect or an optimal position. When it is contracted, they are overlapped in a perfect alignment, so then they are completely into this side where they're not separated on the graph there. So that is where the very small structure of the anatomy is going to be optimal for strength training and contraction.
Yeah, so then how we take those actin and myosin filaments, when the example that Matt gave of these not being totally perfectly lined up, the actin and myosin kind of attach and detach as you're contracting and relaxing. They walk. Yeah. And so when you're not all the way contracted, that means that the actin and myosin are not totally aligned. That would be when you feel weaker in a movement. When you feel at your strongest in the movement is typically where those actin and myosin filaments are perfectly aligned. That's where you're maximally contracted, where you feel the strongest, and where the muscle is the shortest. So those things kind of all line up, and that is why you feel stronger in certain ranges of motion, especially on like a dumbbell exercise.
Yeah. And every movement has that position. And so one example could be the bicep curl, which is very easily to see that contraction happening. And so when you're doing a bicep curl, at the bottom is the most lengthened position of the muscle. And then when you are pulling it up into that upper portion and all the way back as far as you can, you're contracting that bicep optimally and maximally. So you should feel strongest in that position and not so strong in that lengthened position.
Exactly. So this was a lot of anatomy and physiology, and we tried to break it down into some more simplistic terms, but this is a really hard thing. And I'm a visual person, and I feel like when we're talking about, actin and myosin, those things are so tiny, and what your muscle is made up of. We have lots of visuals here and posters here at the gym that we would love to kind of break it down a little further and give you a more visual and more lengthy explanation. But just to wrap up, your actin and myosin is the microfilaments. They're the smallest element of the muscle. They're what's actually producing that muscle contraction. Those overlap. When those are perfectly overlapped and attached, that is where your muscle is maximally contracted and the shortest. Our example was the bicep curl. When you're kind of in that midpoint, you're strongest at that 90-degree bend. Your muscle's the shortest, you're maximally contracted. Those are perfectly aligned. When you extend out, that's where the muscle's lengthened. They're not as perfectly aligned, so you're not going to feel as strong. And that same concept can be applied to any exercise, and we can kind of show you in many different exercises what that looks like, and also why we use the equipment that we do here in person at Breakthrough Fitness is it helps eliminate some of that difficulty in the shortening and lengthening of different exercises to maximize your strength training. So if you have more questions about this or want to just learn more, we would love to answer your questions at your next training session or offer you a free discovery session if you're not a current client, just to answer your questions and get you started strength training. See you next time.